Hello and welcome back to the Simpl Beauty Podcast. My name is Monica. I'm your host and I am a licensed esthetician. And today we're going to be going over the different hair removal methods. We're going to be going over 4 different methods today. And we're going to be looking at the pros and cons of each method and how each method differs from the other one. So the 4 that we are going to go over today is going to be waxing, laser, shaving, and sugaring. As a sugaring specialist, I get these questions a lot from my clients and even from people who are just interested in possibly switching over their hair removal to sugaring, and they're trying to see what the pros and cons of each method are so that they can decipher which method is going to be best for them, because every body is different and different people will suit different types of hair removal better than others. So there's 2 different kinds of wax. There's soft wax and there's hard wax. So hard wax is probably going to be the most common that you're seeing being used, and hard wax is a resin wax and it is applied with the growth of hair. It hardens and then it's being removed against the growth of the hair. So this is typically what people are getting with the Brazilian or other areas such as the underarms, stuff like that. It's also really commonly used on eyebrows. With soft wax, it is a softer paste and it is being applied and then a strip is being put over that and then it's being removed with the strip. So you're using definitely a lot more strips and sticks with the soft wax method. So let's go over some of the details about this method. One of the really common complaints that I hear is going to be that it is a pretty painful process with waxing. Usually I hear that the soft wax hurts a lot worse, and that's because the soft wax is a lot softer obviously, and the wetter the wax usually means the more painful that it is because it is pulling a little bit more. And then another reason why wax is so much more painful than other methods is because of how the hair is being pulled out. So take your eyebrows for example. Let's say you're tweezing your eyebrows, and if you're going to tweeze just with the direction of hair, just kind of pulling it out of the hair follicle, it doesn't really hurt that bad. Now think about going in the opposite direction and pulling and ripping it out just messed up my eyebrow. But think about pulling and ripping it out the other way, the opposite way. It's going to hurt a lot more, right? So that's usually why it hurts that much more. So what does this do? This does a couple of things. It hurts more, number 1. And number 2, it also can lead to increased damage of the hair follicle, and it can lead to more ingrown hair since you are changing that direction of the growth. Sometimes the new hair that grows in, it can affect the growth a little bit because of that damage to the follicle. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're getting a lot of ingrowns with regular wax, soft or hard, you may want to seek another type of hair removal that may be better suited, that's a little bit more gentle on the skin. The second most notable thing about this hair removal method is that the wax being applied is extremely hot. So usually when the esthetician is applying wax, they are going to be testing the temperature on their arm or their hand before the application. But the big but, that doesn't always happen. And what can also happen with this process is that when the esthetician is doing the service, and let's say they're doing multiple services in a row, they obviously should be testing the temperature throughout that whole process, because as the wax goes down in the pot, the temperature needs to go down in the warmer. So sometimes if estheticians are really busy, and obviously this is very unprofessional, but if they aren't testing it, this can lead to burns. So if that wax is going down throughout the day and it's getting hotter and hotter in the pot, then that's what is going to burn the client, especially if they're not consistently testing the temperature on their own skin before the application. And keep in mind that everyone has a different tolerance to heat with their skin and how thick the callus of their skin is, or just their general skin type and sensitivity to heat. So what may feel okay for the esthetician quickly on their arm may not be okay for a prolonged exposure for the client, especially if it's in a sensitive area such as the Brazilian. So obviously this is just an improper technique and improper use of the product, but this is extremely common and I hear it a lot with clients, and this is actually a big reason why a lot of clients switch over to a different hair removal method, is because of this problem with wax, because it is hot and being applied to the skin can lead to burns. It can also lead to hyperpigmentation. So anytime the skin is having trauma being caused with heat, such as a burn, it can lead to hyperpigmentation or hypopigmentation depending on your skin type. And if you have more melanated skin, you are going to be an increased risk for that problem, which is actually really bad, because when you're going to get hair removal, you don't expect to be scarred during the process. And I've unfortunately seen that happen to a couple of clients before. Not my clients, by the way. I don't use wax, but I have seen it before online. I've heard stories, and I have had a couple of my clients who have told me stories about them getting burned. So definitely that is one of the most notable things about waxing, and that's why a lot of people switch over. Okay, and then another risk that is associated with waxing is going to be reactions. So allergic reactions, sensitivity reactions. So this is a huge thing that's now becoming pretty well known with wax. So waxing, I will just say, I'm not going to bash waxing completely, because some people use hard or soft wax, they love it and it works for them. That's totally cool. And you know, everyone has different skin. We're all extremely individual, and everybody has a different skin type, different tolerances, and some people can tolerate the product extremely well, but that is not the case for everybody. And it seems like an increasing amount of clients who are seeking out this service are having bad reactions or negative reactions to the product over time, especially. So since the wax, it is having artificial ingredients, and the resins, the colorants, and the fragrance that is a lot of times added to these waxes, which is exacerbated in the application with heat that's penetrating into the skin. This can cause really bad reactions with people. So the most common reaction that I hear about is going to be histamine bumps, which is the red bumps that you get after the service. And I've heard about these bumps lasting for even a couple of days after the service, which is definitely not normal. And that is going to indicate an adverse reaction, because anything that's lasting over about 2 hours after the service isn't just a skin reaction. That's going to be a histamine reaction, which is an allergic reaction, and that is going to indicate that you're probably not the best candidate for that service because it's causing irritation. Some people will have this irritation or this reaction right away after the wax, which is going to indicate that they're not a candidate for this type of procedure with the wax particularly. Other people, they will not have this reaction at first, but over time they'll start to develop it. So what that is going to indicate is actually that you're developing an allergy to the product, and you are going to want to discontinue use right away when you see that happening, because we don't know how severe your allergy is going to develop and how fast it's going to develop. So that could actually put you at risk for a more severe reaction later on, and that could actually get pretty dangerous for the client. So if you are seeing these reactions, they can definitely vary with the severity of it, but it can be anywhere from a very mild reaction, such as just redness for maybe a prolonged amount of time, maybe over that 2 hour period, which is to be expected and which is normal. Maybe it's lasting 4 to 6 hours. Maybe you're getting red bumps underneath the skin, or maybe you're even getting pustules on the surface of the skin. These would all indicate a reaction, and this is extremely common with this type of product. And one more thing that I will say about wax is that it can actually rip off live skin as well. So those top layers of skin cells, it can actually rip those off with the wax. And I will say that soft wax is usually more of the culprit for this, because it is a little bit more moist and wetter product. So it's actually kind of ripping off the skin with it. And obviously that's really painful for the client. It's extremely, damaging to the skin, and especially with the heat, it's really just damaging that surface layer of skin, can definitely lead to scarring in people who are prone to it. So this is actually why wax can't be applied more than 1 or 2 times over the same area, because you are going to be risking the area to be lifted off with those live skin cells. But what this can lead to is those little hairs being left behind, because if you're not able to get those hairs out on the first or second pass, then they are going to get left behind, and they will have to be tweezed out. Everybody knows tweezing usually hurts more than the actual waxing itself, so that can lead to increased pain as well. And I think that's why most clients perceive the pain to be a lot higher with waxing, not only because we're ripping out the hair in the opposite direction of growth, but also because of that increased level of tweezing that has to be done during the service. All right, so we've made it to our second method. So what is our second method we're going to talk about today? It's laser hair removal. So I'm not going to bash laser hair removal as much as I do with wax because I think it's in general a lot more well tolerated by most people. However, laser hair removal is not an ideal hair removal method for a lot of people. I actually did laser for about a year, so I must have done at least probably 8 to 12 sessions that I did, and it didn't work on me. So it turns out that my hair was too blonde to actually work with this service. So unfortunately, if you have a low contrast in your skin type and your hair type, laser is not going to work for you. So the ideal candidate for laser hair removal is going to be light skin with dark hair. So the more contrast that you have, the more effective that this method will be for you. And if you are somebody, let's say like me, I have light skin and light hair, unfortunately, I don't have enough contrast for the laser to really pick up that pigment. So if you also have like a darker skin tone with dark hair, you will have less contrast as well. and unfortunately it's probably not going to work as well for you either. So of course, you are going to want to do a consultation with a professional in regards to laser hair removal. I don't perform laser hair removal, so I'm not a professional in this arena, but I can tell you my personal experience and my experiences that I've been told to by my clients. I have a couple of clients that have had similar experiences, or I actually have a couple of clients that the laser hair removal did work for them for the most part, but they still have some patches left. So keep in mind, with laser hair removal, you are going to be shaving. So if you have an adverse reaction to shaving, then that's probably already off the table for you. If you're okay with the shaving during the process, which can take anywhere from, I believe, 6 to 8 sessions, I'm not really sure about that, but you are going to be shaving during the process. So you shave right before you go in, get the laser, and then you will see a reduction in your hair. For some people, it is permanent. For some people, it's more temporary. That's how it was for me. It was just temporary, and then it all came back. So the clients that do have success with the permanent hair removal, sometimes they will still get those patches come up. And the problem is when those patches come back of hair, and they go in to get the laser hair removal again over those patches, since they have to shave right before they go in, they can't tell where the patches are anymore because everything's shaved. So that kind of leads to a problem with that. And that's why I do have some clients come in who just want to sugar up those little patches that were left behind from the laser. And I still think it's great that some people are able to remove either all or some of their hair with the laser, but keep in mind that it may not work for you, and it may not be 100% success rate in terms of the surface area that you're going for it to remove. So it may be, let's say, only like a 40 to 80% success rate, and you may still be left with some patches. So that's just the reality of that method. But I think for people who are a good candidate for this method, it's actually a really great option. And it's really great that it causes a permanent loss in the hair in the area that you want to remove. All right, now let's talk about shaving. So shaving, everybody's favorite. No, just kidding. Everyone's least favorite. So I think everybody has pretty much shaved. If you're looking into hair removal methods, chances are maybe you shaved before. And with shaving, there can be a lot of common problems with that. So ingrown hairs, that's a huge problem with shaving. Irritated, swollen, clogged follicles. This is a cause from a lot of bacteria that can be carried onto the razor. Sometimes the razors is not the most hygienic when you're just leaving it in the shower and you're using it over and over again. They are losing their sharpness, and that dullness of the blade can also be an irritant to the skin, which can attract bacteria to the area, because if you're weakening the skin barrier over time with those really dull razors, bacteria to get in there, irritate those pores and follicles, and that can also lead to ingrown hairs as well. If you have a finer hair type, you may have an easier time with shaving, but even with that, you will notice that the hair feels like it's growing back thicker when it's growing back in, which is actually not true, but it does feel like that. And I will explain that phenomenon for you, because a lot of people do believe that their hair is growing back in thicker, which in reality it's actually not. But the reason why it feels like that is because when you're shaving, you're removing the surface level of the hair, and then the root of the hair, which is inside the follicle, is being left in there. So if you kind of think about it, since you're removing that top layer, you're basically cutting it off in the middle, and then whatever is left in the middle, which is the thickest part of your hair, is coming back out as if that was the edge. So since it's growing back out and that's the edge and it's thick, it's going to feel prickly and thick, which is actually not thicker once that hair goes into its resting phase and then finally sheds, and then the new hair comes back in. It's just going to be the same how it was as if you had never shaved. But of course, that process takes a couple months, like 2 to 3 months for that to even happen, usually in most people. So that's why it feels like it's a lot thicker after it grows back. So regardless of that fact, it still is pretty uncomfortable for most people. So it's a great temporary fix, but in terms of long-term hair removal, if you're seeking out something that's a little bit more permanent or a long-term solution, it's probably not going to be your best option. So we went through all of those hair removal methods. Now let's talk about sugaring. So obviously this is my favorite hair removal method. Maybe I'm biased because I perform sugaring, but the reason why I chose that service to perform and to become a specialist is because this hair removal method really does stand out from the rest, and it really does have so many benefits and so many pros with a very small list of cons. Okay, so since we already talked about all the other cons with the other methods, I'll talk about the cons of sugaring. What are the cons? There's no cons of sugaring, actually. Just kidding. I can't think of any. What are the cons of, I can't think of any cons of sugaring. There's no cons of sugaring. I can't think of any. Now let's talk about the differences with sugaring with the other hair removal methods. Okay, so number one concern is going to be the pain. So sugaring is going to be less painful than other hair removal methods that are going to be epilation. So epilation is any kind of hair removal method that is ripping out the hair at the root, such as waxing. So the reason why it's a lot less painful is because we're actually removing the hair and ripping it out in the direction of growth. So with sugaring, we are applying the product against the hair growth, and then we're ripping out the hair with the direction. So just like that eyebrow example I gave you earlier, when you're plucking your eyebrows, you just kind of want to slip it out in the same direction that it's growing, and that's a lot less painful. It's exactly what is going on with sugaring. So when you're sugaring, we're just kind of slipping it out of the follicle very quickly. So it's really just a quick sting. We apply pressure, and then that's it. And you don't feel pain after that. That's pretty much the main reason why people perceive the pain to be so much less versus other traditional waxing methods. And I do think that the heat has a lot to do with this as well, because when you're applying heat to the body, it is creating more inflammation because it's bringing more blood to the area and is dilating the blood vessels a little bit. So when we are removing hair with sugar, the sugar is usually always around the body temperature, so it's never going to really attract too much heat to the area, and it's not going to cause any burns or any burning sensations like that. So there's no risk for that hyperpigmentation or that scarring that you have with the burns associated with traditional waxing. Let's also go over the ingredients list of sugar. So as I said before, it's sugar, lemon juice, and water. Now in reality, the sugar paste that professionals use is not actually just like straight up lemon juice in there. Actually, let me just get my sugar so I can tell you the exact ingredients. So this is my Sweet and True soft sugaring paste, and the ingredients are sucrose, sugar, distilled water, and citric acid. So that's it. That's all the ingredients. Sugar actually has a lot of cleansing properties, so that's why it really works well with the skin to prevent ingrown hairs from happening versus the wax. So as long as you're not allergic to sugar, citric acid, or distilled water, then you're not going to have a reaction to this product. The only reactions that will happen are from the hair removal itself. So when you're doing a hair removal service, any kind of epilation, which is removing the hair from the root of the follicle, there can be some irritation just associated with that process in general. So anything from, a little bit of redness, inflammation, swelling, histamine bumps that can last for up to 2 hours, that's all normal. And typically the reactions do get better over time. So if you're having a reaction the first time, usually that's normal. And over the course of a few sessions, you'll notice that the skin is going to tolerate it more after a few times. So that's kind of like the opposite of what happens with wax, because usually wax sensitizes the skin with the heat and also with the ingredients of the product. This one, the skin kind of gets used to it, and your skin actually learns to love the sugar. And then let's talk about hair loss over time. So with sugaring, after the first session, you do notice, and this is actually with any kind of epilation, even with waxing, you notice the same thing. So you will notice that the hair is growing back softer and thinner over time, which is fantastic because it grows in very baby soft, and it's not like shaving that you feel that roughness and that prickliness a few days after. It really takes about like 2 full weeks to even see the hair starts to be coming back, and the more you do it, the less hair you will see over time. And this method can lead to some permanent hair loss, which is actually what most people want. So the more we damage the follicle over and over, removing that hair, it's not going to want to grow back, and some of those follicles can actually scar over internally, and it can cause permanent hair loss. So that's why people who sugar consistently over the course of many years, they really just they don't have that much hair. There's barely any hair there anymore because those follicles have been scarred over from the inside out. And something about sugaring that people always tell me, all of my clients who switched over from another method such as waxing, everybody tells me this, is that it lasts longer. And here's what I think about that. So to be honest with you, the naked truth is that sugaring doesn't last longer than wax, but it feels like it does. Any kind of epilation, whether it's tweezing, waxing, or just sugaring, it's doing the same thing. It's removing the hair from the root base of the follicle, and it's going to grow back in its own phase in its natural amount of time. So sugaring is not special in that way. It does the same thing. It's just a different product that has a better result typically. But the reason why it feels like it lasts longer is because with sugar, we can go over the same area several times to get all of the hair out. So you really do get a smoother result. With wax, we can only go over 1 or 2 times, because after you get past the 1 or 2 times, you are going to risk losing that top layer of skin, and you are going to risk damaging the skin by removing live skin cells. With sugar, we don't have to worry about that at all because it can only remove dead skin cells, which is going to be exfoliation. So since we're able to get out so much more of the hair, you are going to have less of those little tiny baby hairs that are going to be left over. And you also are going to have no hair breakage. So with wax, you may notice that some of the hairs will actually break off at the base, so they're not being pulled out by the root of the follicle, and that's just due to the nature of the product. If the hair is being ripped and broken at the base, it's basically like shaving, and it's going to be broken at that thickest point in the middle, and it's going to grow back sooner. So within a couple of days, you'll see it start to poke back up, and you will feel that prickliness come back, even if it's just a few hairs on the top layer of the surface of the skin. And with sugaring, we don't experience that because it doesn't break the hairs. It can't break any of the surface layer hairs. And it also is removing more of the hair because we're going over it several times. So due to that reason, it feels like sugaring lasts longer, and technically it is, but it's not because it's just the product. It's just because of the hair removal method. It's just a more effective method in removing the hairs and giving you a smoother result. Since the removal method is a little bit more sophisticated in terms of getting all those hairs out, then you will have a smoother result that is going to last longer, just because we got you that perfect smooth skin by the time you walked out of your appointment. All right, so that was pretty much my review of a couple of different hair removal methods, and these are just the most popular methods that I get asked about the most, so that's why I wanted to go over them and kind of just compare and contrast the methods to see which one may be the best for you, just to warn you about some potential hazards with any of these methods. If you have any more questions, leave a comment down below. Definitely let us know. If you're looking for any more information, I'd be happy to go over that. And thank you so much for tuning into this episode. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye.